It's the 16th of December 2021. Just 2 weeks to go. Kick 2021 down the road. Thank goodness. Hope everybody's doing good. Another jam-packed show for everybody tonight for the last show of the week. The ultimate in evil turns out to be nuclear. We got a poll tonight. Should poisoning, killing people around nuclear power plants with radioactive fallout be a crime? And we got 14 votes, 100% says yes. So Huntington B nuclear power station over there. And you can see all the sheep and the fields, farmers' fields, right up to the site. Also, Sizewell C in the United Kingdom, for instance, is a future nuclear power plant, and they got it put right in the middle of the world's farmland for that country. That should horrify everybody. That's murder. So when you put power plants in farm country, and the majority of them are, that's actually murder. And if you go out and look at farms or nuclear power plants, almost every single one of them, but there's some that are not, they're in the middle of cities, which is even more insidious again. Surrounded by farms. Surrounded by farms. The ultimate betrayal, yeah? And so the poll tonight, should it be illegal to murder people like this? "17 votes. Thank you very much. May I have another?" I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. Nuclear power plants are constantly hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools. So they store reactor cores in pools on the nuclear site. There's no repository. And you have multiple reactors. You have decades of reactor cores. They're still splitting the atom. And what that means is splitting the atom is radioactive fallout. It's constantly creating endless, prolific amount of radioactive fallout. And so they build them in nuclear power plants. First is to get rid of the radiation doses around the plant, and second is purposely to poison people worldwide who don't know any better. It's just absurd, isn't it? Separating fact from fission. This is the Hunterston B nuclear power plant. I believe that's United Kingdom. Nuclear is no panacea for the climate crisis. Even if we build new nuclear power plants, they're going to come online too late. The role of the civil nuclear power in meeting UK's electricity needs and energy security has just been debated by the peers in the House of Lords. And new nuclear should have no role in the United Kingdom's electricity generation, and policies promoting new plants far from offering any hope of security present a threat to that essential provision in this age of shocks. Nuclear power projects are too slow, and this is a killer argument for which nuclear proponents can have no answer. Last year, there was 261 gigawatts of nuclear power or renewables that came online. This year was 290 gigawatts of renewables coming online in 12-month period this year and 12 months last year. 24 months, there was the equivalent of 600 and 33 nuclear power plants worth of renewables came online. How can anything else compete with that? You can't build coal, oil, or gas plant that quick on top of that. But nuclear has no right to exist. It really doesn't. It really is a crime against the ecosystem. It's an omnicide because the releases attack all species. The fastest anyone conceivably imagine new nuclear coming online is well over a decade, and that's the best case. And the people of Finland are hoping that their new plant will come online soon, and the original scheduled completion date was 2009. And still not online, they don't know when. Alison McFarlane, we've called her out a number of times years ago when she was running the NRC at the University of British Columbia in Canada. So she got out of the United States, no doubt because of death threats. And a former chair of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission says, I live in a pragmatic, realistic world. But she doesn't, because we called her out years ago for being a monster. She actually went completely grey hair when she got that job. I don't think at least in the next 10 to 20 years, the nuclear power will be able to have a big impact in reducing carbon emissions because we can't build new plants fast enough. And nuclear is the most carbon intensive thing in human history on top of that. These 2 decades are precisely the time when we have to slash emissions, or if we are to keep the 1.5 alive, as the constipated parties, climate talks have set out to do. But the constipated parties, the Conference of Parties, 26, that's 26 years of it, is United Nations. And the United Nations killed 3 million people in South Korea, or North Korea, when they were first formed. Remember that? And they still have that country under siege 60 odd years later. The country still had land, sea, and air embargoes because they won't give up their natural resources. The whole story is absurd because the United Nations firebombed every community, flattened every community with napalm, the worst of the worst ways you can firebomb a country. Every community was burnt to the ground. That's collective punishment. That's a war crime, by the way. We've lived in a nuclear evacuation zone long enough, and it's time to close the Diablo Canyon. Mothers for Peace call the efforts misguided to close. Now, Mothers for Peace call the effort misguided. Obviously sounds like a anti-nuclear. There's a misguided effort by some to keep Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant operating beyond the closure date of 2024-2025. And the date was set by PG&E and approved by the California Public Utilities Commissions. And additional years of operations would generate more radioactive waste, exacerbate the climate crisis, which is true because nuclear is climate change. I need bigger monitors. I'm getting older. My eyesight is starting to go. I really do need to upgrade my monitors. They're so expensive, right? These are old now. Don't believe the myth that nuclear is carbon free. This is radioactive fallout from Japan's reactors. It's still going on today. This is obviously an omnicide which attacks all species. And there's no species on the planet that is able to sustain radiation. Radiation is lethal to all species, even the smallest, and particularly the smallest. Don't believe the myth nuclear is carbon-free. The fuel cycle of mining, milling, enriching, transporting uranium produces carbon dioxide. Construction and decommissioning activities are heavy carbon dioxide emitters. And the plants all have 2 external power supplies dedicated to them. So they have oil, gas, coal combinations. But generally they were using coal for external power because they can't run themselves. They're like cities. And so they need 2 of their own power plant to build a place, to run it for its life cycle and genocide cycle. And then they need the 2 power plants for 60 to 100 years to decommission it. And they boil 1 million gallons of water per minute. We'll kind of cover that a little bit in a moment here. There's no guarantee reliable baseload power from 40-year-old nuclear plants. Unit 2 failed main generator was replaced in 2019 at Diablo Canyon and failed again in 2020 and was only online 30% of the time that year. The problem with a reactor is the neutron bombardments of the metals. Very brittle, and these are pressurized reactors at around 1,000 psi. And so if they get a little fracture at 1,000 psi, it can turn immediately into a catastrophe. And there's no way to escape the radioactive fallout anywhere on the planet. People don't have fallout shelters anymore in their homes. The complex and costly repairs of aging systems are likely to multiply in the ensuing years, which is not likely, but for sure it is. And the spent fuel pools are overcrowded to at least 3 times their original capacity. The fuel pools also are splitting the atom. They have reactor cores for decades, are stored in these pools with demineralized water, and they add boron to the water to stop the water from causing a criticality. They put the reactor cores in the pools because they're so hot. Remember, they were just boiling water to make power for millions of homes. Well, they're not making power anymore, but they're still splitting the atom, the same atoms. They're released up the stacks all day long into your communities and your farm fields that are surrounding these places. It's 100% the most evil thing you can imagine. The whole concept of what they're doing is the definition of evil. It's the definition of a genocide machine and an ecocide machine and an omnicide machine and a misery machine and a disease factory. It's unbelievable that they even exist. It defies any rationale and any logic that nuclear power, so-called nuclear power, which is a byproduct. Power is a byproduct of the nuclear extraction, where they're trying to get weaponized isotopes for missiles and directed energy weapons. The spent fuel pools are overcrowded at least 3 times their original capacity because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet. A beyond design earthquake, I think Fukushima, could crack the pools, which is what happened at Fukushima, by the way, and cause water to hemorrhage out. And the spent fuel pool could spontaneously ignite. Now, the fuel rods are covered with this metal known as, geez, my goodness. I was just thinking of 3 things at one time. Excuse me. They have a zirconium cladding, and if the zirconium cladding is exposed to air, it will spontaneously ignite, and it'll burn at around 1800 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. And zirconium is what they used to use in the old camera flashes. They would break the lens, oxygen would enter, and it would explode. You would get this big flash of light with the reflectors in the back of it. That was the same material they're using. It has to be underwater. If it loses water, it starts melting down. It gets to 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. All the water boils off immediately. If there's a criticality, it will detonate and it will eject all the fuel out of the pool like Mayak. If the lifetime of nuclear power plants were extended, a new radioactive waste storage facility would have to be constructed because they are no longer allowed to do what they're doing to accommodate the additional waste. And Diablo Canyon circulates 2.5 billion gallons of water every 24 hours in a system responsible for 80% of the loss of marine life on the California coast. Indian Point and New Jersey nuclear power plants have been accused of destroying the entire fisheries for the whole coastline by the destruction of species. 17 billion fish a year, adults killed in Indian Point reactors, and 9 billion in New Jersey's. But they kill trillions of babies and newly hatched fish, and hundreds of millions of small fries. They're an extermination device, is what they are. They're not supposed to exist. And so you're talking about 1.7 million gallons per minute. 1.7 million gallons. So a million gallons is 4,500 tons per minute. Almost double that has to go into the reactors. So normally a glass of water would have 1 billion creatures in a glass of water, and 75 to 100 million of them would be the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain, the very basis, foundation of all life on the planet. And so every minute, just at 1 million gallons per minute, you're talking 16 million times 1 billion creatures boiled up a chimney. That's pure carbon. And nuclear power plants need their own external power supplies, which is gas, oil, or coal. 2.5 billion gallons every day for 40 or more years. So when you add that up in creatures, it's a genocide machine. Diablo Canyon is situated, and then it's surrounded. Diablo Canyon is situated on the nexus of at least 13 earthquake faults. We see this over and over again, where they hide the earthquake faults, and they continuously insist on putting them in the most vulnerable places, desperate for them to melt down and go off. Are classified by the U.S. Geological Survey as major and active fault lines, and keeping Diablo Canyon operating beyond its planned closure is playing Russian roulette. We can do better, and the people of the Central Coast have tolerated living in the nuclear evacuation zones for 4 decades. And nuclear energy is dirty, and it is dangerous. And people should go read that story. That's a great story. France's EDF takes more nuclear reactors offline. Every year, man, we hear about what France, dirty France, terrible France is up to. And so their shares have plummeted, which is awesome, by the way. Unfortunately, they'll just get bailed out because EDF is the government, Areva is the government, Orano is the government of France. And look where France gets its uranium. It gets its uranium from Niger for over 60 years. And what they done was they went to Niger, and they still have military posted there, a huge military posted there. They created instability in the country. They armed external factions. They bribed the local politicians, and then the external fractions displaced them or killed them. They got rid of the borders. They done all of this. They destroyed the country and millions of people's lives so they can get their cheap uranium, their high-grade cheap uranium. They also blew up 200 nuclear weapons and raided every single human in the French Polynesian islands, and even today, 60 years later, refuses to acknowledge it. Generation after generation after generation of governments and politicians have refused to say they're sorry and do the moral and ethical thing. They also done the same to the whole planet, because a lot of these were aerosoled or atmospheric weapons testing, so the radiation went worldwide. And not only that, France, of course, uses 70% of their fresh water goes to nuclear power. So they have to import a lot of food because they can't grow as much as they need because they use all their fresh water is destroyed. It's just disgusting. Everything about France's nuclear industry, its whole legacy is horrific. This one in particular, at the time, it was way upstream. 1,350 megawatts per unit. These are huge reactors. And they found flaws in the reactors, extremely dangerous flaws I have no doubt that they're already aware of. Hi, everybody. On May 12th, 1998, there was a leak on an elbow in a pipe in one of the French's reactors. Water leaked out at the rate of 30 cubic meters per hour. Well, 30 tons per hour. That's not a leak, that's a hemorrhage. It was classified as a level 2. They claimed there was also a proposed target in the World Cup terror plot in 1998. And that Islamic terrorists would crash a hijacked airplane into the plant. Well, they did do that, and they crashed it into the fuel pool. It's instantly a Category 7 event, and everybody got nowhere to go quick enough. Everybody gets poisoned. Now, most likely, because the history of this stuff is they attack themselves and blame it on another country. So they can sell lots of weapons for a decade, and they can get rid of a bunch of the population they're worried about by sending them to wars. In the 1970s, an anti-nuclear movement in France consisting of citizens groups and political action committees emerged. Between 1975 and 1977, some 175,000 people protested nuclear power in 10 different demonstrations. French power joint EDF said on Wednesday it had found faults on pipes and safety systems at its nuclear power station. It was shut down similar nuclear power plants with the same kind of reactors. Found faults on pipes in a safety system. The safety, because these reactors are pressurized, very high pressure reactors. So think of your car tire at 1,000 psi blowing off your car. And you kind of get an idea of why this. So these are all reactors. Everything is brittle from the neutron bombardments. This is why there was a 30-year cap on a nuclear power plant, because of the brittleness from what's known also as a Wigner effect. The safety injection system circuit in the two reactors. So the safety injection system circuit is part of the circuit. So if that goes, then the radiation comes out, or you lose pressure and it detonates, even worse again. Linked to corrosion. And this is, you got the neutron bombardment and corrosion also. This is why they're supposed to have a max of 30 years. That was the original charters. They stopped one reactor for the routine 10-year checkup. In November, it also halted the second reactor at the site protectively, previously planning to restart it on December 24th. Now they can't, of course, and their stocks have nosedived. But all French power plants nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. Nuclear accounts for 70% of France's energy mix, so there's a big incentive to lie to everybody. Japan food farm products exports top 1 trillion yen. In Japan, Japan is bragging now that its exports have exceeded their wildest dreams. Japan has hit an annual goal of 1 trillion yen, and they're hoping to double that in the next couple of years, of exports of food items and farm and marine products. Total figure for food items, non-food, farm, forestry, marine products from January through October is $8.5 billion US. Takes the total beyond the government's annual target. And they're doing a lot of this from a strong online. People are ordering deadly food online to poison their friends and their families and their communities. Strong online sales of beef and sake is also in the United States, and that's going to mean Canada too, right? So strong online sales of beef and sake in the United States. Now, James Lucid was in the comments section a few minutes ago saying how many people got COVID after drinking sake in New York, because the Fukushima Prefecture government had opened a sake shop. The government of Japan's nuclear wasteland opened a sake shop made from radioactive rice and other ingredients, radioactive ingredients, and opened a sake shop in New York City, the government of Japan. That's literally the wildest statement imaginable if you know a little bit about the subject. It's revolting. It's murder. That's murder. Which is why we have the poll we got tonight. The poll we got tonight is, should poisoning and killing people around nuclear power plants with radioactive fallout be a crime? And we have 96% of the people voted yes, it should be a crime. And it should be punishable by death. The people that grow food around that, so let's build a nuclear power plant in a farm country, they should die from radioactive suppositories. And Asia drove this year's numbers. It also, and Asia is not going to be, majority of the Asians are not going to come across my videos, right? Because I'm English speaking. It also says exports for the restaurant industry in the United States and China were up more as people started dining out more often. So restaurants in the United States in particular, and online orders, so they're shipping a lot to restaurants. So it's almost like you don't even want to go to a restaurant anymore after hearing that. Exports for restaurant industries, so McDonald's, Dairy Queen, all of these are going to jump on board of that instantly. Government is planning to double its export goals by 2025. And by 2026, they estimate for renewable energies, in the next 4 years, they're expecting around 5,500 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energy to come online, which will displace all nuclear and fossil fuel plants on the planet combined. And so the year after is going to be dramatic, because technology gains each year, and this is what we're seeing. So nuclear is in its death throes right now and trying to drown everybody around it as it goes down, including the planet and all the species. China and Taiwan are among 14 Asian economies that have kept restrictions on food imports, because the United States lifted and didn't report, no American media, Western media, reported on America lifting restrictions in September. We covered it here exclusively. But the Japanese was out bragging about it. And then they quantifies it with a stupid video, gloating that they're murdering people worldwide. Japan's first Pokemon theme park opens in the disaster-hit Fukushima Prefecture town. The Pokemon Company and the Fukushima prefectural government have signed a partnership agreement in February 2019. They signed the agreement 2 years ago to help promote the deadly Fukushima. It's disgusting, yeah? It's disgusting. Pokemon's creator's father is from the town of Nami, which is a nuclear wasteland that after 7 years they started moving people who didn't know any better back into. The whole nuclear industry should be lined up alongside the trenches and shot in the back of the head. Legally, of course. There's nothing good in nuclear. They're the degenerate scum murderous industry of 75 years of genocide on our planet, from just splitting of the atom released into the environment, all the nuclear dumping, all the nuclear meltdowns they had. The Nami municipal government spent 17 million yen, 150,000, the government, not Pokemon now, but the government, to create a park on the grounds for a free park for Pokemon. To trick people coming back into a nuclear wasteland. All residents of the town were evacuated after the nuclear accident. You don't go back to a town like that. Why would you go back to a town like that? And they import all kinds of food, peaches, apples, all kinds of fruit, all kinds of rice. Now think about rice, and Japan never stopped growing rice for a single minute. Rice is used to make all kinds of candies, all kinds of cookies, all kinds as a part of the ingredients, right? All kinds of pastries. There's so many things you can do with rice. You should look it up, and it's terrifying. It's a scumbag industry. It's an industry of degenerates. That's one thing we know about it. Good people don't work for nuclear. You can't get a job there because they know you will turn on them. All residents of the town are evacuated after a nuclear accident. They're going to open up a Pokemon to trick children. Because who's going to go to a Pokemon theme park? Children. So everybody in that Pokemon company should be arrested and jailed for the rest of their lives. They are the very epitome of scumbags. They're actually monsters. They're actually degenerate monsters. They're incredible monsters to go and do that. Avoiding blackouts using 100% clean renewable energies. The researchers found that new electricity generators would take up about 0.84% of U.S. land, compared to the approximately 1.3% of the land currently occupied by the fossil fuel industry. So what they found out was that if farmers use 1% of their land across the United States for renewables, you wouldn't need oil, gas, coal, or nuclear anymore. Just 1% of farmland. Because you got scumbag degenerates like Michael Schellenberg and Environmental Progress, the people they're not people, they're creatures that has spawned. They're telling you, you'd have to cover all America in solar panels to get enough electricity to power New York City. That should be illegal, what they're doing too, by the way. You found that per capita household annual energy costs were 63% less than in a business as usual scenario with renewables. And in some states, costs could drop as much as 79% for your energy bills if you used all renewables. And renewables have gone into free fall for prices and have gone through the roof for reliability and for the ability to capture energy. And the best part is that long duration batteries were neither needed nor helpful. So they didn't even need the long duration batteries. And you can use compressed air storage where you dig mine shafts and you pressurize air down there. There's a new company in the United States that is building a huge storage of compressed air, and they can power the same as a full-size power plant for 6 hours for peak power for 50 years for $800 million investment. But you can also at the same time do pumped hydro. So your excess energy, you pump water up a hill and compressed air into mine shafts that you just like tunnels, right? That are like, think of mine shafts, big tunnels, and low pressure 120 psi air. Instead, grid stability can be obtained by linking together currently available batteries with storage of 4 hours or less. But it's better to use pumped hydro and compressed air. And if you can't use it in that particular spot, then you can think about batteries. But you first and foremost, and you should always consider harmless technology like compressed air storage and pumped hydro storage. And identified over 500,000 places worldwide you can naturally pump hydro and store it, pump water and store it. According to the new Stanford University, of all places, study that analyzes grid stability under multiple scenarios in which wind, water, solar energy resources power 100% of U.S. energy needs for all purposes. According to the researchers, the energy system running on wind, water, and solar coupled with storage avoided blackouts, lower energy requirements and consumer costs, while also creating millions of jobs, improving people's health, and reducing land requirements. The study analyzed grid stability across all 50 United states and districts for 2050 and 2051, following a sector-wide transition to 100% renewable electricity in their models and the deployment of battery storage and demand response. And once again, right, you don't need battery storage, it's too complicated. It's better to have compressed air storage, which is obsolete technology, and pumped hydro when applicable. As a result, it found no blackouts occurred even during summer in California and winter in Texas. That's 3 anti-nuclear stories tonight already. Isn't that amazing? All great stories on top of that. All of them completely lucid. All of them curb stomping the nuclear industry easily. Time to board the renewable energy train. The finance day at constipated parties saw $130 trillion committed from the private sectors. Renewable energy costs have fallen considerably. 10 years ago, the sector couldn't survive without subsidies. And now solar is one of the cheapest forms of energy. It can potentially provide power for 60% of the planet. Solar costs have come down 90% in that time, and wind costs have reduced by 80%. These are stunning numbers. These are absurd. This is what we all dreamt of. It's only going to get cheaper each year, if that's even possible. And energy storage, again, right? You got to think about compressed air storage and pumped hydro. Degenerate Boris Johnson told a Conservative Party conference in September that nuclear power was necessary to decarbonize. And see, people that say you need nuclear to decarbonize the planet, these are actual monsters. These are paid by the industry. These are actual real-life monsters. The government has also said it is a way of counterbalancing the intermittent nature of renewables. As I just showed you earlier, that's simply not true. But that's the official lie, and they just keep regurgitating it over and over and over. UK only generates 17% of its electricity from nuclear, so how are you going to decarbonize a country on 17%? But you can't. Nuclear can't decarbonize it. It's hemorrhaging radiation for millions of years. The fuel rods are going to be splitting the atoms for millions of years. This is why they're so dangerous. France, in comparison, the proportion is over 70%. And I mean, that's literally idiotic. It would be 80% if they could, but they got no more fresh water they can spare. If everybody stops drinking water, they can do 80%. They use 70% of the fresh water in France. It's sucked up. You can't even grow food over there. Well, you can, but it's limited compared to what you should be growing. They import an absurd amount of food. But all nuclear power plants are built right into farmlands. Renewable energy saw a record year of growth. This year, 290 gigawatts is equal to 333 nuclear power plants in 12 months, well, 11 months, of renewables. You can't build 300 nuclear power plants in 1 year. And in the next 4 years, there's another 5,500 nuclear power plants where the renewables are going to come online in the next 4 years. Because technology doubles every year, right? Should the trend continue, renewable energy capacity will exceed that of fossil fuel and nuclear energy combined by 2026 in 5 years' time. Well, it's almost 4 years because this year is over. So they estimate another 4,800 gigawatts of renewable power capacity will come online by 2026. And that's the same amount of power that's currently being generated from fossil fuels and nuclear sources worldwide. So they're talking about 4,800 gigawatts over the next 4 years. That's equal to 5,500 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies in just 5 years. Just, 4 years, 48 months. Shunned after Fukushima, nuclear industry hopes smaller reactors can play a role in energy transition. Again, they don't exist. They hope that they hope this and they hope that, and they're instead of dealing with what's really going on, they're like, well, let's wait and see. Let's wait for the planet to die, and then maybe small nuclear reactors will come online, and maybe they can help decarbonizing the planet is not what you got to do. You got to denuclearize the planet because global warming is caused by radiation. These plumes that you're looking at is Fukushima after 19 days, that particular plume. This one right here is after 19 days, covering the whole planet. Pulse, it never stops coming out, by the way. Continuous plume of radiation. This is terrorism on a global scale. Pulsing energy every second, heating up the planet. Pulsing energy every second, heating up the planet. So these small reactors that don't exist, why would you put your hopes in something like that? When renewables are going to gut the nuclear industry in just 4 years' time. So they're going to come out and do every dirty trick. And so you name your nuclear companies Ultra Safe Nuclear Corporation. Ultra Safe, which tells you a whole lot about this company. Instead of nuclear corporation, it's called Ultra Safe because they know people hate nuclear. That's their attempt to brainwash the population that read about their product, Ultra Safe Nuclear. Can you imagine what kind of twisted sicko you got to be to name your company that? You can imagine what kind of scumbag you got to be to dream up that name. Because you got to be a scumbag to come up with that one. A large part of Ken Darlington's job involves convincing the public the latest generation of nuclear technology is safe, so safe that it can be mass produced. His job involves convincing the public, a public relation campaign. And they're extremely good at stuff like that, by the way. The US-based company is known in Canada as USNC-Power. is developing the smallest nuclear reactor around, designed to produce enough power to provide electricity for 5,000 homes, or roughly 5 megawatts. And if it goes according, then Canada will buy 100 of these useless genocide machines that are using mixed oxide fuel on top of that. As efforts to reduce emissions gather momentum, if you want to do, like coal, oil, and gas don't create plumes of radiation covering the planet. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't pulse energy on top of that every second. Gas, oil, and coal emissions are not toxic to all species on the planet. Most of their emissions don't travel very far, a few hundred miles at best. Radiation circles the planet endlessly. Fukushima-derived radiocesium arrives in the Arctic Ocean, says the report. So this is another look over here, don't look over there version. It arrived in the Arctic within about 10 days. Right? This model is only a 20-day model. If you let the model go for another 10 days, everything is covered. But it's global warming. It's there forever. It's for millions of years, billions of years. It's going to pulse energy at 136,000 miles per second. Imagine how much energy it takes to do something like that. That's why nuclear is such a dangerous... It's a planet killer. It's a slow kill that kills all the species. P answer says, wind is a joke. Well, it's not a joke. If you back it up with storage, it's one of the, you got to use a combination. We got no choice. We got to come up with solutions. We can't stay the same old, same old. And it's a terrible thing to say. Wind is a joke when it's not a joke. Wind is producing power worldwide for many years. If you use the same amount of energy to develop wind and solar as you put into nuclear or anything else, you would have all the issues resolved 100 years ago. A beach in Fukushima. Now, Fukushima is just a couple of miles, 2.5 kilometers away from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdown. And so why would they show you that one? So the atomic cesium-134, 137 radioactive substances flowing into the ocean and ends up in the Arctic. So this is designed to manipulate you. It covered the whole planet. The radioactive fallout was immediately and consistently. And the people who wrote the story, I disrespect you for doing that. Civil nuclear power, energy, the House of the Lords. This was from United Kingdom a few days ago. And they were debating their energy bill, and I found the transcripts through one of the stories from earlier. At its peak in 2009, the U.S. so-called nuclear renaissance consisted of applications to build 31 plants. Despite spending more than $20 billion, no nuclear power plants have gone into service. They spent $20 billion on litigation for Yucca Mountain on top of that at the same period, right? In South Carolina, $9 billion was spent before Westinghouse went bankrupt. Paladin also went bankrupt the same year. And who else was it went bankrupt? I can't remember off the top of my head anymore. Causing the project to be cancelled. In Florida, also an ECR state, more than $1 billion was spent in total. U.S. electricity customers are burdened with paying more than $10 billion for cancelled nuclear plants and $13.5 billion in cost overruns. $13.5 billion in cost overruns? No, they stole the money. This is what they've been doing. This is why it's an industry of thieves and murderers. Nuclear industry is smart enough to know that it cannot win on cost, so it's reinventing itself as the new superhero which will save us from climate change by providing the baseload capacity to underpin renewable generations, right? And we've heard that narrative since the 2015 Paris Accord, which was a dirty, dirty thing to do to this planet. And it's French, what do you expect, yeah? They're horrific, horrific people in the government down there. The billions we seem to be intent on spending to provide excruciating, expensive nuclear energy could be much more effectively deployed. This is a lord in Parliament in the United Kingdom a few days ago. That could first be done through demand reduction. For the price of Hinkley Point C, you could retrofit enough homes to save all the energy that the plant will produce. And remember the people that were getting arrested during Constipated Party 26 who just want to insulate Britain. Why burn all the money on nuclear when you can insulate all the homes in the United Kingdom? Right, which makes sense, but every time they showed up, they got arrested and beat up and thrown out. Policies on energy storage and release. Well, energy storage, and they do pumped hydro in the United Kingdom at one place that provides power for peak power. If we had a coherent plan for the storage of excess energy, pumped hydro. Hang on, I'll bring it up now. We talked about it so much. Compressed air storage and pumped hydro. And there's a new company. So you got pumped hydro could deliver 100% renewable electricity. These dots are meant to just give you an idea of where these natural spots worldwide already exist, 500,000 of them, that you can naturally pump water into. And so extra energy, pump water up a hill into a reservoir, and when the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining, you have consistent energy, and you also have peak power covered, right? But startup pumped compressed air storage, this was $60 million, and you're pumping air down into the ground, and with the excess energy, and wind and solar can't use the same grid as nuclear. Nuclear made it so that they couldn't work in tandem. Hydrostar plans a 400 megawatt, 3,200 megawatt compressed air storage in United States. So that's just last month, November 24th, less 3 weeks ago. They're going to spend $800 million with a technology that has a 50-year systems life, uses no toxic material, is emission-free, and can provide rotational inertia in support of grid stability. The plant, named blah, 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 will be able to deliver 400 megawatts of electricity for 8 hours and will be comparable in physical size to some of California's largest fossil fuel nuclear power plants. All they're doing is compressing air and then using it for peak power. So my time is going to conclude that by saying that the issue of safety is not about nuclear weapons, it's about the waste that it created. That was the previous story we were just talking about. And that was Parliament transcripts from a couple of days ago from the United Kingdom. Waste is pulsing energy, is splitting the atom, and those atoms are drifting around the planet, invisible snowstorms constantly, from almost 1,000 fuel pools worldwide are splitting the atom, invisible snowstorms being emitted into the environment. You can't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it. You have this incredible fallout non-stop everywhere, constantly, because this is what nuclear power plant fuel pools are doing. They're splitting the atoms, and the farms are all being bombarded like you're seeing right now. This is constantly happening to all the farms around all the nuclear power plants. The farm products are sucking up the radiation and physically contaminated with the radiation. That's shipped to market. That keeps the numbers low for the scumbag nuclear. Japan urged to revoke decision to dump nuclear wastewater after study finds Fukushima radioactive material reaches the Arctic Ocean. Now, when you look at this site, you see all the tanks? I counted the tanks. And there's 750 tanks, including the small ones, not 1,000. Hang on, because... And they're burning it in incinerators across Japan too, by the way. So to understand the tanks, TEPCO to abandon their Areva system amid contamination water crisis, 2014 August. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operation. Also, TEPCO is unable to bring contaminated water issues under control at Fukushima. The Advanced Liquid Processing System known as the ALPS, and this is 2014 April, promised to treat all contaminated water by March 2015. A goal it is now emitting will not be realized. There are certain parts of the site where we don't even have full control. TEPCO says the groundwater bypass operations are not having effects. So the bypass operation was meant to reduce tons of water from entering the buildings and out into the ocean. That didn't work. They don't know when, if ever, the pumping operation will have any tangible effects on the groundwater levels. TEPCO failed to deliver on promise to install fences to restrict contamination from hemorrhaging into the oceans. It was a $1 billion fence and they didn't build it because they couldn't afford it, they said. Their ice wall operation is not meeting expectations because it didn't freeze. You can't make the temperature low enough to freeze water. And they admit that the ice wall won't stop it. When they flew over the country at 1,000 feet, it was 3 million becquerels of just iodines at 20 kilometers from the plant. Right, and they just told so many lies for so long. And they abandon everybody in the country. They poison everybody in the country. The health effects in Japan are just staggering, eh? It's not what I wanted. Okay, so the tanks, back to the tanks very quick here. Risky stalemate as science battles human fears at Fukushima, 2000 that's not where we're supposed to be, right here. 2013, we'll start there, Mari Yamaguchi, by the way. 1,000 steel tanks in 2013. 2014, Mari Yamaguchi again, they have 1,200 tanks. In 2017, they have 900 tanks. And try walking with both of your heels on the ground. See how that works for you. Go give it a try. Japan will have to dump radioactive water into the Pacific. 2019, they had 1,000 tanks, which is in this line right here. And 2021, they got 1,000 tanks. But when you count the tanks here in 2021, you only get 750, and that includes the small ones. The small ones are right there where my finger is too. Not only that, they faked this reactor fuel pool and faked, which is reactor 3, and that reactor 4, they faked that fuel pool too. We covered that a little bit last night. Research shows that radioactive substances that float into the ocean due to the Fukushima nuclear accident in 2011 reached the Arctic Ocean. Right, that's a disingenuous and dishonest and deceptive and deceitful study. Because radiation, all different isotopes covered the planet. This is plutonium. This is modeled from TEPCO's numbers. Macron, which is France, hit with stern threat by Austria and Germany, by the way, who vows to fight the French nuclear president on nuclear labeling nuclear. France wants to label nuclear as green. The French hope that having the sustainable energy label could boost France's struggling nuclear energy industry, which was bailed out by the state in 2017. Macron's ambitions to classify nuclear energy as green has only been met with opposition from other EU member states, has already been met with opposition from EU member states, including Germany. Austria is clearly against nuclear energy. And they have allies, including Luxembourg. And Luxembourg, 2 years ago, created a law that said people in Luxembourg can sue the nuclear power company 30 years after an accident if they get sick with diseases known from nuclear. 30 years later, the citizens can still sue the nuclear company after they originally got poisoned. So they got 30 years to sue nuclear if they have an accident. They find out about it 10, 20 years down the road. We will not shy away from this discussion. We'll continue it vehemently. European Union is preparing a rulebook on climate-friendly investments, which from next year will define which activities can be labeled as green in sectors including transports and buildings. So the EU's aims is to restrict the green investment label to climate-friendly activities and steer cash into low-carbon projects, but most importantly, stop companies or investors from making unsubstantiated environmental claims. That's what nuclear entire legacy is predicated upon, is that deception. And so there is no debate about this. The EU is just afraid, terrified to come out and say nuclear is not green, clean, carbon-free, or too cheap to meet or anything else. And there's no reason. Now, they've delayed their assessments 2 different times. This is the 3rd time. But it's completely obvious that nuclear is not. Now, if they label nuclear as not carbon, not green or sustainable, then France is going to look like an idiot because 70% of their country is being destroyed immediately by the radiation. All their power plants are surrounded by farms, poisoning all these people. If the EU is ever to have any legacy, like no one's going to remember the former EU members or committees or anything like that. But this particular committee of the EU has this one opportunity to be remembered historically forever. They'll go down in the history books if they say nuclear is not green and carbon-free and everything else, which is not. And it's easy to quantify those assertions. No one's going to remember the previous EU members, but everybody will remember the current ones if they vote morally and ethically and do the right thing and say, no, it's actually not carbon-free. And that's not impossible to prove because I provide the documentation every single day. Every single day I provide this documentation. And so no views tonight at all. because we're talking about real stuff, right? So literally no views, 19 people on my show with 580 new subscribers, because you took down my other site with 24,000. Brand new site. So don't forget to ring the bell so you get my subscription. But I'm censored beyond imagination. 18 people, 26 thumbs up. How did our poll fare tonight? Should poisoning and killing people around nuclear power plants with radioactive fallout be a crime? And an astounding 97% of the people agreed that it is 100% unequivocally a crime. And so, why would you put nuclear power plants in farmland? What kind of sick and twisted and demented? That's nuclear. Anything to poison you, because that food gets shipped worldwide, right? That food, that food gets shipped worldwide. Yeah, well, a tough week. We got cold weather down there. And we're going to get 5 centimeters of snow tomorrow and 4 the next day. We did raise some money. I wanted to get a tarp because the one on the boat is just turned to rags. And so I was hoping the tarp there on the boat, they're at least $100, and then it's almost $50 to go to get it because you can't get it locally. You got to go to the city. So just straight into the city, pick it up, straight back home, and get it on the boat. And we raised the money that should cover it, close enough. Put that up there so people know I got their money, showed up. Christine K donated $25. That was a few days ago. And James Lucid, as you know, donated 123 Canadian. I seen that tonight. And so that's 150. That gives me the money I need for the tarp and the gas to go get it. Because it's a big boat, you need a big tarp. And then the tarp has got to put up with all the rough edges on the boat. You got to go over the radar and all the fixtures and the lights, the exterior lights and everything. There's a lot of edges. You can't cover them all up. And my truck is really old now, right? It's got a lot of miles on it. Absurd amount of miles on it at this stage from all these years. It's ran into the ground. I keep the maintenance up because we can't afford to replace it, even though it should be replaced. We need a new motor for the boat, for the big boat. We took that to Alaska 6 times, right? On the west coast, and it's an old motor as it is, right? So we're going to end the poll, 34 votes, 97%. Nearad, Stephen, P answer, SCH, Colette, don't worry about donating this month, honey, it's Christmas. I appreciate you thinking of me. You've already done lots for me, and I don't want to see you come short. Even though I desperately need it, I just rather not see. I don't want to see anybody get short, right, during this time. It's a difficult time for a lot of people. James Lucida, extra hugs, my friend. Thank you. Nancy and Katja. Hi, Katja. Provoke, Mike Mansfield, Ella, Revelations, Jeff. Blue Jay Outpost. Yeah, it's rebuild maybe, yeah. I already rebuilt the leg on it, right? A couple years ago. It cost 800. I put the guts of a 150 down into the leg. So the leg's still holding up really good. Yeah, maybe rebuild it, I don't know. Well, the new motor is 17,000. Which is, you got to realize, I'm out on the ocean. One of the roughest coastlines on the planet. Right, so it's unnerving, right? It's very unnerving. Nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. What will you think of next to murder all the people, I wonder? But yeah, no, rebuild is definitely cheaper. I can't argue with that. Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, you're welcome, Jeff. You don't need to thank me. Thank you for coming by and gathering up the knowledge to help your loved ones and your friends and your families. Eventually, they will ask the question and you will have the answers. And then for the policymakers and people like that that do find my presentations, it's a lot of work to put together this operation. The research shows that Fukushima is an extinction level event. Not maybe, not almost, but 100% unequivocally an extinction level event for species and humanity. We gotta fight back. We're running out of opportunities. Now's the time to gut nuclear and leave it in a ditch on the side of the road to bleed out and die. God bless and hugs for everybody. Have a great night, everyone. See everybody tomorrow. Take care, folks. I'm sorry, we'll see everybody on Sunday. I'm taking 2 days off. I'll run to town tomorrow morning and see if I can get back before the snow comes and get the tarp on the boat. Take care, folks. Have a great night. We'll see everybody soon. God bless.